Hey everyone, today we are going to see how to build a React application using the SSDK CLI. So what we're going to build here is called a survey optimization. Survey optimization allows you to enhance your surveys by passing the survey questions to GPT. And with the help of GPT, it will analyze all the questions in your survey and it will give you the score based on three categories, which is engagement, clarity, and relevance. Let us see a quick demo of it. So in this app, first we let the user select what survey they want to optimize. One is this AppNest presentation. I click on this AppNest presentation feedback, which will give me all the questions present in this survey. And the next thing is we need to describe the survey that we have created over here, which is a feedback survey to get information about a presentation from the students. And if I click on the get score, you will find the score over here, the engagement, the clarity, and relevance. So this will better optimize your survey and increase responses for it. And this is what we are going to build in this React application. So let's quickly go to our VS Code over here. So the first thing you need to do to create the application is create a folder, create an empty directory, because SSDK create command will only run on an empty directory. Make sure you have one here and open that on the VS Code. And now let's run the command SSDK create, and it's asking us to choose the product. Let's select SurveySparrow. The your first serverless app, and there is your first React app. The one that we are going to focus on is the your first React app. Let's click on that. And this is the basic setup, just how it looks like in a npx create React app, but there is few files as well here, which is manifest.json. You can consider this manifest.json as a settings for your application. So there are certain specifications over here, which is location. It is nothing but a page where you can view your application. You can consider it as a page where you can view the application that you're running here. The next thing we have is the whitelisted domains. So here we will specify the endpoints that we will be accessing from our application. Let's say that you're visiting API endpoint such as OpenAI, or if you're visiting SurveySparrow's API endpoint, you have to specify it over here. Otherwise, it will throw URL not whitelisted error. Now the next thing we need is just go to the application. Let's just quickly go over the code. We have a simple app.js file, and we will be mostly focusing on this main.js file. Okay. Now the first thing we need is, before we actually run the application, is set up this iparams.json. So what do we need for the user to give to the application? One is the SurveySparrow API key, correct? Because we want to fetch the surveys from their account. So we want their own API key. One is SurveySparrow API key. The next is the OpenAI API key. We are not going to provide access to our account. They need to give the OpenAI API key so that they will use their own model to actually fetch information, correct? So now, where are we going to get the key value pairs for this iparams.json? Let me quickly go to the documentation here. And here, if you go to the configuration section, and in this, if you select installation parameters, this contains entire documentation related to iparams, or what are the fields that you can enter and everything. And if you scroll down a little bit, you will find the key value pair, which is the SurveySparrow API key. This is what we need now. Let me just copy this, and I'll place it in the iparams.json. So what this will allow us to do, when you install the application, a tab will open up, and that tab will ask you to enter the SurveySparrow API key. That is, it will ask the user to enter the SurveySparrow API key. I'll quickly show that. Before that, let me just add another key value pair, which is the OpenAI API key, because we need both, right? And here, let me just quickly change this to OpenAI, just on 3 locations. Okay, I've changed it. Let us keep this as OpenAI API key and OpenAI API key. We don't need this one here. Nice. And then that's pretty much it. Okay. Now, so we have specified installation parameters. Now the next step would be to create the SurveySparrow API key. Got it. How are we going to do that? Let me just go to our dashboard. This is your SurveySparrow dashboard. Click on the settings icon over here. Scroll down a little bit on the left, and you will find apps and integration. Here, click on the create a custom app button. Just create a file, a custom app over here. Let's call this survey enhancement app. Let's call this as survey enhancement app, short description, and application that optimizes the survey using ChatGPT. Great. Let me just click on all the scopes for now, and then let's click on save here, and you will receive the access token. This is the private access token. Now we have got the prerequisites done. Now the next thing would be, let's run the application, before which, since this is a React application, I don't know if you have noticed this, but we don't have the node modules over here. So what we need to do, run the command npm install. Now that the node modules is installed, let's quickly run the application. ssdk run. Great. So now this is first asking us to enter our custom configs, which is nothing but the installation parameters. So one way we can do this is either visit this custom configs directly, or the better way to make this understandable, what I would suggest is first go to your application over here, and in there click on the apps and integration. As you're already there, just scroll down a little bit more, and actually you're supposed to find the application over here. So how do we find that? Just append the query params dev equals to true. Now this will allow you to preview the application that you have in your local environment, that you're running in your local environment. Let me see here. Yes, I have the SurveySparrow app. This is the development application. Now if I click on here, it will take me to the installation parameters that I previously showed. Yeah, we have received our SurveySparrow API key and the OpenAI API key. Now let me just paste the one that I copied over there, the API key that I copied over there. Now for the OpenAI API key, I'm gonna enter my own OpenAI API key. Please feel free to enter yours. Now let me just click on install. Yes, now the API keys are installed successfully. Now how do you check if it's installed or not? This is a very important process. Pay attention here. And if you go to your application, and if you click on this .ssdk folder, okay, you see here this .ssdk folder, click on the local store, you will find all the data that you passed in the iparams over here. That such as the first thing is our SurveySparrow API key, which we have passed over there. We have got it in our local store, and also the OpenAI API key, we have also got it over here. I've entered my sample OpenAI API key. Please be to enter the original one of yours. Got it? So if you just remove this entire data, you can do the iparams configuration one more time. That is, you can do it again. You can install the application again. If this is not there, that means your application will be uninstalled. That's the purpose. The next thing would be is we've got the API key, we've got the ChatGPT token. Next thing, let's build the application. So if you go to the source folder, you will find the components, and in there click on the main.js. This is where you will be writing majority of the code, right? So how do we preview this application? So we have installed it, we have done our part with passing the configurations, etc. We need to preview it. For that, just change this apps and integrations to marketplace apps over here. So it's the URL is nothing but /settings/marketplace apps dev equals to true. This will show you all the installed apps for you. Yes, as you can see, this is the installed app that we have in our development. If I click on here, I will see a sample application. Cool. Now the next thing would be, let me just remove these data. I don't want this for now. We just need this one. And now what is the first thing we need to do? We need to fetch all the list of surveys to show it in the drop down, correct? So how are you going to achieve that? There is some specific feature called, if you go to the documentation in the features, if you go to the request methods, this is a specific feature that is a part of SSDK CLI. So every time you make a request, make an API call from your SSDK CLI application, you have to use this request method. And there is a request method specifically designed for client-side application and the server side. That is your React application and serverless application. So which is what we are going to use now. So since we are using React application, we will stick with this code over here. So what this allows us to do, there is a specific technique that we will use here, which I will explain now. Let me just copy this code quickly. You also to copy this one, and let me go to my file and let me paste it over here. Great. Now I need to wrap this within a survey. Just wrap this within a survey function, handle get all surveys. Let's call this async, and let's just change this to constant. Now let me just put these code within this function. Great. Now what this will do is basically make a request to this domain, which will list all the surveys, and we can access it here. Now what is this domain? This domain is nothing but, let me replace it like https://api/surveysparrow.com/v3/surveys. This is the domain, and we need the get request to actually make the API call. For reference to the APIs, what you can do, just visit this website, developers.surveysparrow.com/REST APIs. You will find the endpoints to all the REST APIs we have. One is the get, this is what we are using now, and there is create a survey endpoint, there is contacts endpoints, there is response endpoints, and so on. So this is what we will be using now. And now you can see there is the SurveySparrow API key. What does this placeholder denote? As you can see, it is fairly evident that iparams.SurveySparrow API key denotes the API key that we have it in our local store over here. That is this one. Okay, so whatever the value that the user entered, if you just place the placeholder like this when you are making an API call through this client.request method, it will automatically be replaced with the actual value. That is the one great advantage over here. You don't necessarily have to access the API key or any value that the user entered in the iparams within your application. You can use the placeholder to do that. Now there is one change we need to do here. We don't have to actually pass this window.client. We can just change this to props.client, because the client object is already initialized in the app.js over here. So we are just passing that as props to the main function, which we are getting it over here. So if you just use props.client, it will work. props.client.request.get, and we have this over here, and done. Everything is done. This will get us the result, but it will throw us an error. Can you guess why? So now that we have specified the survey API endpoint here, you have to whitelist it in the manifest.json. So let me just go to here, and in the whitelisted domains, you have to specify the endpoint, which is https api.surveysparrow.com/v3/surveys, right? But what problem is, let's say there is multiple endpoints. Let's say you want to access responses, let's say you want to access contacts. In that case, you have to mention every single endpoint over here. That is not a better decision. In that case, let's just add in a placeholder. This acts as a placeholder, so anything that comes after the .com will be accepted as a whitelisted domain. And also over here, the API endpoint varies for each data center, so I'm just gonna add in a placeholder here. Okay, now this is done. Let me go to the main.js. Let me just quickly check if everything's correct. We first need it in our when the application runs, right? That is when. So what I'll do, I'll create a use effect over here with empty dependency. That means it will run only once when the application loads. Now this is where I will call this handle gets all surveys, and let's just see what this gives us. Let me go to the application, and this is our page, right? And since there is no code, let me just inspect it. Console, and you will find all the surveys that we have created in the console log. So it is in the body.data, right? Let me just this is a JSON object, so JSON data. In that case, you have to pass it as a JavaScript object. So how do you do that? JSON.parse response, and what did you result? I think okay, result. And let me just quickly store this in a variable as data. Now after we pass this, we have to get the data, right, which is body.data. Now this data contains all the list of surveys. Great. Now we don't necessarily need all the data within the surveys, right? We just need few things, such as the ID of the survey. We need the name of the survey, and and we need the questions we can update it later. So first we need only the ID and the name of the survey. So what we can do, data equal to data dot map survey, so return, we just need two things, which is survey ID, which we can get it in the survey.id parameter, and then we have survey name, which we can get it in the survey.name field. That's all. Now after we get the exact data, we need to store it someplace else, right? So that is where we will create this state variable. Let me quickly create the state variable called surveys, set surveys, and then you have to use useState, and let me just set this to empty array for now, and also you need to import the useState. Great. Now within the application, scroll down below, set the data in the surveys, set surveys. Done. Now we need to show the list of all the surveys, right? In that case, what I'll do, I'll first create this something called heading. Heading tag allows you to create, as the name suggests, allows you to create h1 h2 kind of elements. So here let me just name the application survey enhancement, and then we need a select drop down to get the list of all the options. So how do we actually use the options to show the list of all the surveys? Correct. For that I need reference. So let me just go to the Twix website, twix.surveysparrow.com, and in this website let me go to the components, select. This is the UI that we will be using to build the SSDK CLI, any application in SSDK CLI. Just make sure to go through all the documentation for this Twix, and in the options we need an array of objects, and each object should have a label and should have a value. Got it? Now let me just map the surveys here, surveys dot map survey, and in here I need to return what? One is the value, which we will name this as survey.name, survey name, and then we need to map the label, which we will also call survey name, and then let's pass in another field, an extra field, which we will name this survey ID. We'll also name this as survey_ID. Got it? Now this will list all the surveys that we have. Let me first check now. Okay, this is it shows selection is not defined because we have not imported it. Let me just import it quickly. And also when we are running this code, we have to ensure that this code should run only when we have the surveys correct. So in that case, let me just create a simple conditional statements here. Surveys.length is greater than 0. Only when the surveys.length is greater than 0, the select drop down will be shown, otherwise it will be null. Yes, you got it. Now we have the text here, we have the surveys. This is looking very small. I'll just change that. So for customization, if you want to do any manual customization on the Twix components, you should not do it by creating a class. You should do it right there itself with a property called CSS. And in here you can specify the width. Let me just specify this as let's call it 80%. And also you can specify the size of the select statement. I want this to be large. Let's name this large, and let's see the preview. Yeah, this looks good now. Now if you click on the select drop down, you will find the list of all the surveys we have. Got it? Now The next thing, after we get all the surveys, when the user clicks on any of the surveys, we have to keep track of it, right? That is where we need a variable, a state variable called current survey ID, and we need such set current survey ID let's keep this an empty string, and then we have got the current survey ID. Let me add in an on-click property in the select here. On-click, on-change property. Yes. So in the let me add in an on-click property in the select here. Select survey. Let me just quickly create that function, constant handle select survey. Here there is an advantage. So advantage of using Twix. So usually when we are passing an handler function, you will get the event property over here, but here you can directly get the target itself. That is, you can directly fetch this object that you have passed within the options. This is one advantage of using Twix. So that means I can get the survey name using target dot value. Using target dot value, I can get the actual survey name. Using target dot ID, I can get the actual survey ID. Got it? Now let me just, this is after selecting the survey, we have to set it as current survey ID, right? So this is where what I'll do, set current survey ID, and we will set the target dot ID here, target dot ID. Let me just quickly check if I've written it correctly. This is survey ID, sorry, target dot survey underscore ID. So we have now set the survey ID here. Now every time a new survey ID comes in, you have to use that survey ID to get all the questions within that survey. That is where you have to create a function called handle get all questions of a survey, and let's keep this an asynchronous function, and this should only run when there is a survey ID, current survey ID. Now we are going to make an API call. I'm just wrapping this in a try catch block so that we can get the errors. The try catch block, constant result equal to the same procedure that we written over here. Let me just quickly copy it. I'm not going to write it one more time. In the handle get all surveys, copy this API call, paste it over here, and from this section we are going to fetch the responses, not the surveys. So how do we get the endpoint for that? Let's quickly go to our REST API, and what do we need? We need questions. Yes, you can see there is get all surveys questions, and here what is the endpoint? /v3/questions, and in the query params you have to pass in the survey ID. Great. So now this needs to be questions, and in the query params it has to be survey ID, and that survey ID is nothing but the current survey ID state variable. Got it? So now this will allow us to get all the questions using this survey ID. Now after doing that, the same procedure, you will get a list of all the questions. So how are you going to pass it? Constant let questions equal to JSON dot parse the result, which is body dot data. So this variable will contain an array of questions. Now what we are going to do, we just need only a few values, right? So what I'll do, I'll console log it and check what are the values that we need. Now we need to call this function, which you can do it at the top. Here create another use effect, and this use effect will only get triggered when there is a survey ID. We'll also make another condition. If there is no survey ID, do not run the below code, and will get all questions of a survey. I'm going to call this function. So this function will only run when a user selected a survey. Now let me just quickly go to my application and go here. So let me click on any one of the surveys here, product market fit, and let me inspect it to see if I've got all the questions. Yes, we have an array, and yes, we have got all the questions for us, which is how would you feel if you could no longer use, etc, etc. Okay, and now since we have the questions, let's just see what are the data that we need from each questions. Okay, from each question we just need the survey name and then the type. That's all we need. On each question, one property is the ID, the other is the rtxt, and then the other is the type. That's all we need. So here I will just update this questions array, questions dot map question. So what do we need? We need three properties with it, which is question ID, which is question dot ID, and we need question text, which we'll call question dot rtxt, and then the other thing is question, what do we have other thing, which is type, question type is nothing but question dot type. That is it. Only we need three properties over here. So we need to display the questions down below. And where do we do that? In here, let's create a condition over here. Only when the questions dot length is greater than 0, you can perform some code. Let me just call a simple div here. I'll just change it afterwards. Otherwise, return null. Now I'm not sure we have set this in the state variable. Let me quickly do it. Yes, we have not set this. Set questions. We have not created a question state variable, which we will also do. Let's quickly go up and create a state variable called questions. Set questions use state. Let's create an empty array. Got it? So we have created a state variable called questions, and we are putting all the questions that we are getting in the questions state variable. Great, everything's done. Now only when the questions dot length is greater than 0, we want to see the questions, correct? In that case, what I'll do, questions dot map question return. We need, let's call this a text type element. Okay, in the text type element, I want this to be, let's keep this medium, large would be too much. Okay, within the text, what we need is, we have to actually get the value, which is nothing but question dot rtxt, and let me just call an hyphen here, and here we will pass question dot the type. So actually it is supposed to be question text, and this is supposed to be question dot question type. Got it? So now this should display all the questions after the user selects the survey. And also I'll add one more thing here, current survey ID, and the question or length is greater than 0. That is when you have to display all the questions. Great. Now let me go to my application over here. We remove all these things. Let me click on the selector survey, which is product market fit, and yes, I can see all my questions over here. Great. If you want, you can do some further CSS styling to make it look better, but for now let's keep it simple. Now the last step would be to send the questions that we have in our survey to ChatGPT, right? So that is where we need a button, and that button, let's call this get score, and that button should only be visible if we have the set of questions and the current survey ID. Got it? Let me just create a quick condition over here, current survey ID, and then the questions dot length is greater than 0. this button get score can be visible, otherwise null. And also there is one more thing that we can do along with this button. What we can do is, so this is throwing us error because the button is not imported. Let me just quickly import it. So it is there now. Now along with this button, let's say I want to let user describe about what survey that you are creating. Let me just wrap this button with an empty fragment, and on top of the button let me create an input tag. Just import it over here. And in this input we can say the type to be text, and we can change the size to be let's call this a large, and then the width, let's call this 80%. Great. Now everything is running perfectly. Let's just see if this button and this input is visible or not. Let me click on the survey. I will get all the questions. Yes, this is shown here. I'll also increase the size of the sketch score button as well. Size large, done. And also we need to get the description, right? In that case, let me on change, I have to put this in a state variable, so which I can find created over here. Constant survey description set survey description use state. Let's keep it empty for now. Scroll down below, and then here you will get the actual value. So set survey description as this value. That's all, done. So now this survey description state variable will hold the value every time we change something on the input. And if you want, you can add in placeholder as well. So enter the survey description. Nice. Now how are we going to send this to ChatGPT? That is the important part here, right? So what I'll do, let me just quickly copy a function that I've already created, and you don't have to do it. We will have a reference to this application, this code somewhere in the description, and you can refer that. Let me just quickly copy the code. Let me paste the necessary code that we need to have, which is the handle get score function. I'm placing it just on top of the return statement. So here what this code does basically, so every time you click on the sketch score button, it will first check if there is any survey description or not. If there is no survey description, it will return. And then now I'm structuring this format data, because this is how we will be sending the questions and the survey description to ChatGPT for it to analyze and give us the score, right? So this is the format. You have to keep in mind that this is the same format you need to use. So the one is the survey description, the next is the survey questions. I'm just mapping over the questions and getting only the necessary fields, which is the question ID, question type. And I think we don't need it like this. Okay, let's keep it like, yes, let's keep it like this. And apart from that, we will just console log the data to check if it works or not, and the query data. So this query function, this is where we will make the request to ChatGPT. Got it? So what I'll do, let me just quickly create this query function. So within the source folder, create a new folder called helpers, and in there create a new file called query.js, and within this query.js I'll just quickly paste the code that I have over there. This query.js, this is the prompt that we will be sending it to sending to ChatGPT to get us the score in this format, which is scores, engagement, clarity, and then relevance. This is what we need, and this is the exact prompt I'm using, so make sure you use the same thing. And then next we need to create another file called getscores.js, and in there just paste this code, and we don't need this actually. and this export async functions, that we are going to pass the request body, and then we are going to pass the client. So this client is passed because we need to make an API call, right? And we're still using the client object to make the API call, even though it is a third party API request. And this is where we will pass the ChatGPT token. But this time what I will do, I will use the placeholder instead of the actual variable. Let me use the placeholder. So if you go to the main.js, you will see the SurveySparrow API key placeholder, right? Let me copy that. Let me go to this get scores and I'll paste it over here. But this time I'll just change this to OpenAI API key, because that is what we specified in the iparams. As you can see over here, we have specified it as OpenAI API key. Got it? So we have specified the API key. We are getting the console log, we are returning the pass data, and everything is done. Great. Now we have the query.js done, we have the get scores, but there is one more thing. We have to set the ChatGPT URL. So let me just quickly copy the ChatGPT URL and paste it over here. So after pasting the ChatGPT URL, the next thing we have to do, don't forget to go to the manifest.json and enter the same ChatGPT domain, because otherwise it will throw URL not whitelisted error. Please make sure that you pass the ChatGPT domain as well as the SurveySparrow API domain in the manifest.json within the whitelisted domains. So you've got the get scores functions, you've got the query and everything. Got it? Great. Now the next thing would be to import this query and get scores within the main.js. So what I'll do, import query from helpers, and also I need what? Import get scores from the get source files. Got it? Now let me just scroll down a bit, and in this handle get score, I will be making the query call, which this query will actually give me the prompt of the data, that is whatever the prompt that we need to send to ChatGPT. And then after we get the prompt, which will be stored in the query data, we are making a request to get scores where we are passing this prompt as well as the client object. So in the get scores function, you can see this is the actual prompt, this is the actual ChatGPT prompt, and this is the client object for making the API request. And then this will give us, this is just console log to test if it works or not. And then the score, this is where we will get the data and parse it to get the actual scores, which is relevance, engagement and clarity. Got it? So there is one property we need to set, which is the set score. Let me quickly do it. Constant, a state variable called score, set score, use state. Let's keep this null. Before we click on the get score button to actually send the data from our application to ChatGPT, let me just quickly check this input tag over here, and let me change this to e.target.value, and now this looks good. Let me scroll up to check everything looks fine. Yes. And also I've changed the ChatGPT API key that we have entered in the iparams to the original API key. So make sure you do that as well, otherwise it won't work. And then let me go to the application, and if you click on the select tag, click on any of the survey here. Now specify the survey description and make sure to keep it very simple for the token to understand. Feedback survey, Rublin's feedback for a product. And if I click on this get score button, I should be able to preview, I should be able to get the scores from the OpenAI. Let me click on this button, let me inspect it. Yes, I got the score, I got the engagement, the clarity and the relevance score. Got it? Now let me just quickly build a UI that will preview those scores. Okay. So after the button here, what I'll do, I'll create a condition called score. If there is a score, then create a div tag, or let's create a flexbox tag, and then create a text tag. That's all. So we need three texts, right? One is engagement, clarity, relevance. Now, what are the properties we need? We need engagement, clarity, relevance. Okay. So let's name this engagement, clarity, relevance, and we will keep this as the property as score dot engagement score dot clarity, and over here score dot relevance. Let me quickly check the spelling. RELEVANCES. Great. Now we got it right. Let me just increase this text to size medium, and then let me just specify the flex direction for this. Let's keep this column. Let's specify some gap. Let's keep this 10 pixels, and we'll set the align items to center, the justify content to center. That's all. That is the basic UI we need, and this code will only run when we have the score object, okay, which is initially set to null. Now let's test this out. Let me click on a survey here, and then let me pass in some description. Survey obtains feedback for a product. Let me click on the get score button, and I've got the engagement, I've got the relevance, and I've got the clarity as well. So you can just make some styles and to look better. So this is how you build a React application using SSTK CLI, and I'll see you in the next one.